So wait, we did a short circuit before the different times.
Yeah.
Was it short?
Yeah, so the first year, so we were on the SFTN scheme together one year. Yeah, it was brutal. For some reason, they had more teams and fewer slots than ever, and so it was really cool.
You guys might need some more time.
Oh, thank you.
Get some ice in there.
And yeah, I don't. Did you get the funding? No, I didn't. Yeah.
thank you everyone for joining us for this panel. This is screenwriting or screenwriting. So we have 3 filmmakers who have their short films premiering at the festival. Some already premiered, some still to go. And we get to ask them loads of questions. So please do think up questions that you might have for them. I have a list, so I will get started. So we have with us Maryam Hamidi. Maz, I forgot your surname. Maryam Hamidi, whose short film Bahar is screening tonight. Bryan Ferguson, whose short film Red Room, it's screened, hasn't it?
Screened tonight.
It's screening tonight as well. And Daniel Cook, whose film The Bayview screened last night. Yeah. So I would just like to get us started by having you all do a little bit of an introduction. Tell us a little bit about who you are, your sort of journey as a filmmaker. Is this your first film? Have you made loads before? And just giving us a sense of kind of where you're at with your career at the moment. So, Maz, do you want to?
Yeah, so I've definitely entered the filmmaking world in a circuitous way, having had a career as an actor and having kind of, I guess, predominantly lived in the theatre world a lot. I mean, I did a lot of acting on screen, and that was that was the sort of lightning bolt to kind of steer me towards making work for screen. But yeah, so it's been a long and winding road, and I've made another short film through a sort of underspent fund from SFTN years ago, which didn't have any festival life and didn't have any, we just didn't know how to do anything. And I was breastfeeding a 6-month-old baby, and my producer was 36 weeks pregnant when we made the film. So it was all a little bit unhinged, the way we went about things. But so it has been really wonderful to have that experience and to approach things with a lot more clarity for Bahar. So yeah, that's sort of some words of what I've been up to.
Hello. When you said about craziness and not knowing what to do, that was generally the first sort of 10 years of my filmmaking career. A lot of the time it was just, I was a one-man crew doing pretty much everything from cinematography, editing, casting, production design, running around, just tiring myself out. Too old for that now. Yeah, for some reason people saw something in those daft little films that were about self-amputation and belly button fetishes. And it just kind of shows that people are a bit perverse, and, you know, it's good company. With Red Room, the film that's playing tonight, it was the first time that I actually had a sort of actual crew. So it was one of those times where I was thinking, do I pick up this bag of stuff? Do I carry that? And people just telling me, put it down, put it down. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then not knowing that it was a monitor I was holding rather than a camera. So I'm like trying to like set up a shot. But yeah, so that's where I'm at the moment. And I'm kind of moving into features now that I'm in development, doing my first feature with Short Circuit and BFI. So blah, 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 blah.
So I trained as a printmaker and photographer at art school, and started filming in 2017 when I decided to change up what I was doing. My first film was called The King and I, and that was screened at Glasgow Short Film Festival. It was a bit experimental. I don't really know how I found the narrative in that film. I think I had the luxury of time when I was at the college to muck around, and it's a sort of portrait of this guy called Graham Crombie who lives in this amazing flat that he's turned into his sort of labyrinth of like thoughts and art, and he's just this fantastic character who was previously a priest and left the priest school to become an artist and to have an antique store and stuff. So that was my first film, and I guess my stepping stone into filmmaking. But as I say, I didn't know what I was doing at the time. I had no, the art school were a bit like, you know, giving me conceptual ideas and but not actually about narrative. So it was quite interesting filming loads of footage. I had so much footage, it just like completely was ridiculous, and so I had no script. So I just sort of found the narrative in the edit. So it was quite a fun process. And the Bayview is really my first like sort of professional commission from Scottish Documentary Institute, and I guess it screened last night. And I don't know. I mean, I can talk a little bit about. Are you going to ask us to describe the films?
I'm gonna ask you guys to talk about the films as well in a second. Yes?
Yeah, cool. Well, I won't tell you too much then. And basically, yeah, that's finished now, and I'm working on a few projects up north with continuing to film some travellers and other characters in Aberdeenshire. So yeah.
Amazing, thank you. We are going to begin by me asking you a little bit about your films. And I'm quite interested in like the origin stories of where all the films came from. Now, they're all very different from each other. We've got documentary, adaptation, an original sort of idea as well. What is it that kind of sparked the idea? And within that, you can maybe give us your elevator pitch if you want. Putting you on the spot. Or just describe, like, for those of us, imagine none of us have seen the films yet. How would you tell us about your film? What's it about? And how did you come to your idea? Anyone can start.
Just pick, Raisah.
Just pick.
Okay, well, my film is based on a book by Helen McClory, which is Bitter Hall. I tried to pronounce my T's there, don't I? Bitter Hall. So yeah, it was commissioned through the Edinburgh International Book Festival, where they paired up 6 Scottish filmmakers with 6 Scottish authors, and it was supposed to be like a 5-minute sort of your interpretation of what the book was. However, Bitter Hall is like fucking War and Peace, so there's no way you're gonna jam-pack all that into 5 minutes. So. It was a real challenge for me to adapt somebody else's words, because I generally write all my own stuff. So yeah, it was a really interesting process. But I remember talking to Helen and asking her, "Are you okay if I fuck this up?" And then she's like, "It's okay." And I went, "You've spent 2 years. I don't want to bastardize your 2 years of your work." And she's just like, "No. Here's the keys to asylum. Go crazy." And she was very giving in that way. So it's like a weird sort of mutant baby that we both sort of wrote, and it's just kind of speaks for itself. But I'm very proud of the film. It's essentially about 3 characters that come together during a sort of paranormal experience, but that makes it sound like some sort of shitty Discovery documentary. It's not about fucking ghosts and whatever. You should go see it. It's on tonight. You know, maybe you'll get something from it. I don't know, but yeah, does that answer that?
That's fine. Don't worry. We'll dig in a bit more in a minute.
Great.
I'll go.
On.
So Bahar is a study of a woman really on the cusp of another chapter of her life. It's an exploration of empty nest and the experience of your adult children leaving home, but also through the sort of prism of being an immigrant woman, unanchored by like a wider extended family unit. So the empty nest is truly very empty, and also processing a very significant loss of a child 10 years previously. So those are some heavy ways of describing the film, but really, I guess it's a kind of a rolling metaphor of exploring what that feels like, that toxicity of grief and guilt as well. And in terms of its origin, I guess to some extent, I don't want to do an injustice to the women I know who are immigrant women who've been through experiences similar to this, but certainly witnessing some of the elder females who were first generation immigrants and seeing kind of what, after decades of just running in crisis, trying to survive in a new country, moving as an adult and adapting, but seeing your children kind of hurtle past you and assimilate, acculturate much more capably, and what happens when they have surpassed you and left. I think there's something in that I was just trying to kind of reach for and explore. I think there's a very, I guess there's a touching on ghost story tropes or horror tropes, but in a kind of more of a magic realist way than a horror way. So I think I was trying to use that genre bent approach to help uncrack her inner world, basically. Like no one's ever done that before. Oh, God.
Is that me? No.
I think that was the cue.
It was kind of like Pan's Labyrinth. Your microphone starts coming alive, and the Bayview's kind of it's a story about a family who moved from the US to Scotland and bought this derelict hotel, which is called the Bayview, in Macduff, Scotland. So some of you guys might have seen it last night, and it's just it's like an old crumbling hotel they've bought and made into their own family home in this fishing village, which is like predominantly white Scottish sort of fishing trawlers and stuff like this. And it's their home is also this place for respite and refuge for migrant fishermen from all over the world. And at the heart of the story is Susie and Matthew, and Susie's the mother, and Matthew, that being her son, are kind of running the business and looking after all these fishermen who are essentially working these really horrendous visas, transit visa contracts, which means they're exploited in all horrible ways that the Home Office can, So they're there as a sort of like a home away from home. And my film's just this sort of glimpse into the different guests who come and go from the hotel. But the idea for it really came from, and I was thinking about this last night because someone said, "Oh, do you know what the seed of the idea was?" And I was kind of, I don't actually know, because it was so long ago. I'm sure you guys felt the same when, like, over COVID, like filming and stuff, that when it actually came round to the filming and then looking back in it now, it felt like a long time ago. But basically, I'd been working on another project up there, and there's just so many characters up there. And someone had said to me, if you met Susie, she's got this sort of fantastic thing going on. And sort of bumped into her, and we got along like a house on fire, basically. And she told me she was a photographer as well, and was doing, photographing the fishermen, photographing characters around there, and said, "If you ever need a bed, you can stay in this house whilst I'm filming this other documentary." And I said, "Aye, I'll do that," and stayed over. Well, actually, whilst I was filming, I was staying over there as well, but in these quirky sort of military-style bunk beds, and they were donated from like the fishermen and stuff around the village. And then just waking up in the morning and hearing all the different languages, and the Scottish fishermen talking in Doric, and then you've got some Ghanaians from Accra talking in Twi, and some Filipino guys like cooking breakfast. It's just like kind of bizarre that it sort of exists in that part of the world.
So I'm gonna stay with you, Daniel, and I'm gonna talk about. I want you to talk about the process of scripting documentary. What does that look like? Like, how much of it do you plan beforehand, and how much of it is actually about the process of just documenting and hoping that you'll find the story?
Yeah, it's kind of with documentary, I'm not really sure. I guess with the Scottish Documentary Institute, you have to pitch your idea, you have to write it, you have to rewrite it, like you guys probably had to do, and you do feel to an extent that you've scripted beforehand quite significantly. But
what was your pitch to them? Do you remember?
I don't know, actually. Do you want me to do an elevator pitch? Is that what you asked me to do?
No, you don't have to.
No, but I think it was different. Yeah, I think it was about Susie. It was mostly about Susie, actually, and not about just the community. And Matthew, actually, Matthew wasn't in that pitch originally, so I didn't really know didn't really know Matthew back then. And so I had scripted this idea, and the idea made sense, I think, because I'd said, you know, it's this sort of matriarchal character who's looking after all these young, sort of lost men, as it were, or something like this. And I think that changed over time, which was fine. But the anchor of the idea always existed. But a lot changed in the process of filming because, you know, a lot of the fishermen I wanted to film weren't there, and the crews were coming and going, and Susie wasn't that comfortable on camera. She really was. The first thing she said to me was, "I don't want to be in the film. You can film I'll introduce you to the Ghanaians and the Filipino fishermen and stuff, but I don't want to be on camera." And sort of slowly kind of moved that. So the scripting was just a constant sort of thing of chopping and changing essentially. And I don't really work with a script, so I think it's more like a really detailed shot list and the stories in my head, and then I just kind of cut it down. Unless, of course, you were working with, say, an editor or something like this, then you have to have for a documentary, you need to have a sort of script. But yeah, I think it's an all-out sort of mixed approach to the film.
Okay.
From what I remember, yeah.
Thank you. And Bryan, now Red Room, you kind of touched upon it when you were talking about what the film is about. You had this book, and you had to find the story from within that. How do you condense such a thick novel into a short film, and what was that process like for you? How did you find the story that you wanted to tell?
First of all, you go through a massive state of anxiety. So you've got this big book and a deadline for when you need to shoot it. So I didn't get the commission till kind of late on, so it's like, oh yeah, and it also took forever for the book to actually arrive. So it's just like slap the book down, all this dust comes up, and it's like, okay, we need it next week. And it's like, okay, cool. I'll just drag this to the office. I don't want to sound like I'm taking a piss out of Helen's book. It's really good. It's really good. It's just very thick. So anyway, yeah, it was a challenge because I'd never done it. But what the thing that was really great about it was our aesthetics are really. We've got a similar sort of interest in things. So when I was reading the book, I hadn't met Helen yet, but when I read the book, I realised that. Oh wait, I could totally find stuff in this and try and build it into something that's a lot more condensed and a bit more contained. See, like with the book, it's like a 3-person perspective of the one event. So you have to find a scene where they're all in the one place. So there was a great moment where it all is set in this room that's red, and I work with a lot of colour. So I was like, okay, well, that's gone in. And then taking pieces that make the characters who they are and trying to weave them all together. So I would have, the book would be just completely dog-eared and highlighted with sections that were really important to me, that really spoke to me, little bits of dialogue and things like that. So then you would just kind of piece it all together. And oddly, it was very much an organic sort of thing. It wasn't as stressful as I thought it was going to be, because normally I build everything up to be like the worst thing in the world. But then when it was getting written, it was fine. Then I sent it to Helen and just like turned off the computer and hid in a dark room. And then she said she liked it and it was good to go. So it wasn't as taxing as it was, but it was a lot of work. It was a lot of paper cuts and a lot of highlighting, but yeah.
So did Helen have kind of final approval on the script then? Was that part of the process?
No, not really. I mean, she handpicked me to do the thing, so I think she kind of knew that, like, I kind of want that person to do the film version. But I felt I owed it to Helen to sort of be like, this is you wrote this, I kind of want, please say you like this. So yeah, but yeah, she was great, and then she came down to set and she was just like the production design and everything. She was just very happy, which took like a little bit of pressure off, because making a film is, as you guys know, is a lot of work. But yeah, it was great. It was a really good experience, and it was a lot less taxing than I thought.
Great, thank you. And Maryam, so Bahar, it's a really contained piece of work. I have watched it several times, and I feel like every time I've watched it, I've taken something new from it, like I'm discovering different elements of it. Where did you begin with it? I mean, you spoke a little bit about, seeing immigrant women and some of that stuff. Did you start with a theme? Did you start with a character? What was the first thing that made it the film that it is?
Yeah, definitely character was a beginning point, and also textures, I think, in a way, just the domestic sort of sphere as something to excavate a bit. So some ideas came to me like this. I occasionally think it's a really like noughties thing, that when you went to uni and you'd come back with a suitcase of your laundry because you didn't have washing machines in your flat. And I think people now have washing machines in their like halls of residence, but back then, and so like that thing of like having this process of sorting and washing over the course of a weekend felt like a shape, and that in itself was a beginning point. But also this conversation I had with my mum years ago, where like these little unravelings where she was like, yeah, when we dropped you off for uni and we drove back down to England, I cried the whole way. I was up because I was the youngest of three that was moving out. And there's that thing of like, God, these little private spaces, sorry, this is really loud the way I'm holding it, these private, intimate things that she hadn't shared with me when I was younger, but as I got older, she was sort of, and I am a mother now, and talking about that chapter in her life and what that meant felt pretty significant to kind of shaping what would come in the story. Not in a conscious way, but just it had unconsciously sort of sunk into me. And so the process really grew, like this idea of this weekend of laundry was the starting point of a shape of a story. And for me, the process was like much more traditional, write maybe 400-word synopsis, and then drill that down, and then eventually get to the point of creating. And with this, once I had some development support to write that into a beat sheet or an outline, and then to take that to script with some support, and with a producer relationship as well. So I think at this stage of filmmaking, your producer is your script editor, much more than particularly like a lot of the funded schemes. They don't have like an outsourced script editor that will work with you. Your intimate relationship with your why do I keep saying intimate as in close, not like intimate, but my relationship with my producer like meant that we were in tune, and she was really able to kind of like, we were on the same page with the work, and so there was a real understanding in the kind of development of those key stages, from synopsis to sort of outline to beat sheet before going to script.
So, talking about the development process, and it maybe you want to kind of continue on with the kind of the path that you're on right now. What were the big challenges? Because now, so all of you have worked within a system where you have, I guess, execs, and you've got some money behind you, and you have, you can have a proper sort of setup. What were your big challenges? How long did it take you to get to sort of that shooting script stage? And I guess, Daniel, for you, that question is not necessarily shooting script, but when did you know you had enough footage to kind of go, that's it, I've got enough, and it's time for me to now shape the story in another way? So I don't know if you want to kind of continue on with your thought.
Yeah, I think just like, actually we were both on the 2017 round at SFTN, who obviously kind of the short film or emerging filmmaker development is now an organisation called Short Circuit, but previously was Scottish Film Talent Network, and I developed Bahar in that programme and didn't get the money, and that process, like, it hurt a lot, but also it meant that I kind of mothballed the idea, but it had a stage of development way back in like 2017, where I did some story outlining, but there was very little integrative sort of support from that particular funding development scheme. There wasn't the same kind of interrogation of story and outline, whereas come to Short Circuit, there was a much more kind of, like, they wanted to see your story documents at stages, and they wanted to work with you on that to develop them. And that helped a lot, I think, but also just meant there was a shared investment. It felt very much like it wasn't like you in a kind of strange competition or something to get money. It felt like it was a development process, and whether you come away with the money or not, you have had a process of investment into your idea and project. And that developing an idea in that way, yeah, of course, it's more interrogative. There's outside energy coming into your creative process, which can be overwhelming sometimes or can be frustrating, but is just a massive part of the industry. So I'd also, since that time in 2017 to like fast forward to 2020, getting, was it then? Yeah, 2020 for when we got the funding secured for Bahar through Short Circuit. I developed a lot as a writer and had kind of TV commissions and things like that. And that industriousness had sort of maybe just made me feel very different about what it means to have relationships with producers, script editors, execs, and to be relaxed with that, and to kind of feel secure in my own practice, to know where the lines are for myself, and to kind of navigate that with a just a confidence in the vision and trust in the vision, so that there were things that you go, actually, that will make the idea better, or there's things where you go, oh, that's a note, but what you're suggesting won't work for me, but there's something underneath it that I'm going to interrogate and find a different way through, because you've obviously hit on something that's jarring or whatever. So I'm talking too much. So
No, you're not at all. No, this is all, I think, very useful and very interesting for everyone. Thank you for sharing that. Bryan, how was that sort of like development process for you? How long did it take you to get to, because you said you came in quite late, you had a very limited amount of time. Yeah. How quickly did you get to your shooting script, and what was that process like?
To be fair, like it was very, very quick. I mean, the only sort of, it was like I wrote the script, and then usually I don't write a draft and then redraft it. I'll usually draft as I'm going. I'll stop and I'm like, okay, that bit's shit. I need to fix that. That's not going to work. And then I kind of draft it as I'm going, so then it becomes the definitive sort of version of it. And then you put it away, then you go back and you're like, okay, so it's all shit. So let me just fix all of it again. But yeah, it was quite freeing, because it was such a quick turnaround time. Like, it's not like with Short Circuit where it's just constant like executive meetings and things like that, because what I'm doing at the moment with the feature that I'm doing with Short Circuit is I'm on the second draft of the script, and I've never wrote a feature-length script before, but I've never had so many like sort of meetings with execs and things like that, where they're sort of just, you think you've wrote something really great, and then it's just like, yeah, hole here, that shit, change that. It's not as brutal as that, but you know, it's because you're so precious about it can feel like a bit of a gut punch. But I was coming into talking to execs kind of fresh, so you sort of kind of learn to develop that sort of, like you were saying, where you sort of get used to it. Because I come from a music video background, where it's just, you get the notes later, rather than when you're doing the concept and making the video. But with Red Room, it was just very quick, the whole thing. We just didn't have time. They were commissioning 6 6 shorts, and it was all the sort of same crews. So it was just like, and mine was the last one, and the one that went over budget, and fucking, I was the pain in the arse. But yeah, it was very quick. I hate saying it's quick. It's not like we just drew a picture and put it up on the TV for like 15 minutes. It's like we put a lot of work into it. So yeah, I'm just waffling on.
No, I mean, sometimes if you have a deadline, you have to meet it, don't you? You
Oh,
don't
God, yeah.
really have the option of taking longer.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, with music videos, there's little money and deadlines constantly. So I was fine working in that environment. But the short circuit thing with the feature scripts has really been an eye opener, and it's really like just fucking awesome because they're really strengthening what the potential there is for what you're writing. So I mean, I don't see short circuit. I see short circuit as being like a great thing for Scotland at the moment, to be fair. And normally I'm quite like, oh, there's not enough stuff in the Scottish industry, but you know, like it's just what they're doing at the moment is absolutely brilliant.
It's good to hear. And Daniel, what about you? How did you know you had what you needed, or did you go away, edit, and then come back and get some more footage? What was that process?
Well, it was quite interesting because in the Scottish Documentary Institute, loads of documentary filmmakers were at all sorts of different stages, and you know, Laura had what's it called last night? Yes, yeah. What was it called again? Sorry, Born in Damascus. Yeah, and she already had some of her footage, but she just needed the guidance to sort of help with that. And I'd already filmed a little bit before the commission. Although I didn't have the story, I just had like the visual style locked in. I had the context of the building and the characters, and I had trialed like some good ideas and some crap ideas before I went to Scottish Documentary Institute. So I basically did, from what I remember, it was like 1 week of shooting, and then I had like 3 weeks of editing. Then I went back out and shot again, and within the first shoot, I discussed with the guys at the Institute about the fact that the fishermen were not as accessible and that they could only appear in certain shots. And he said, you know, they said, oh, Matthew, have you thought about filming Matthew? And I said, no. And, you know, I started adding that into my shot list before I left the film. And I guess that was like quite a big moment because I just had these shots that were like kind of like down as context shots, like Matthew and Susie talking in the kitchen, just, you know, having a bit of a chat about the house, but I didn't expect them to full-blownly talk about like the future of the hotel and stuff like this. And then that obviously clicked in place. But even at the time of filming, I hadn't realized that was an important scene. I just sort of cast it off as like being a quite casual thing. And then I went back to the Institute and showed them the footage, and they were like, "You've shot your narrative arc scene, like your little doodad that's going to make the rest of the story fit into place." So I dropped that into the timeline with footage I already had, and was able to figure out that there were certain empty slots, and it was almost like I had to work backwards, because I actually ended up putting that scene close to the end. So then I knew exactly what I needed on the second shoot and how much footage I needed, and some of it felt just additional footage to what I already had, which was nice to do. But yeah, I think it helped. Yeah, it helps having that like.
Sorry, I'm just going to with editing. I feel the same way because I don't know. Do you edit your own stuff as?
No, I'm not capable.
No, it's not hard. Sorry if anybody's an editor, but no, I feel that it's massively important. Well, for me anyway, it's been a huge help to edit like your own stuff, because when you're on set or even when you're scripting, you know, okay, well that's going to work here, or that we can cut that there. Or when you're on set, you can use the script as a blueprint basically, and then you're sort of thinking on set when you're running out of time, okay, well fuck that shot, we don't need that, take that out, we don't need this, because this will cut together and then we can work with that. So yeah, when you were saying that about editing, I think it's really important, and I don't know where my point was going, but I'm just talking, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point, and like you can apply that to documentary or narrative filmmaking, is that sometimes you don't have a storyboard, and you know, it's nice to be able to say, to sort of preempt, you know, what that next shot might be, to fill in that and then work your way back. I mean, because of my, like, sure there's loads of dyslexics in this room, but because of the way I work, I skip like loads of stuff and go to the end and back and then forward, and then, you know, it's not really a point, like it's never a sort of point A to point B sort of thing, is it?
We had a panel this morning, and one of the points that came up was, if you don't know your ending, you don't know your story. So actually, your point pretty much chimes with what was said this morning as well.
Yeah, no, it is definitely useful. I was absolutely cheesing. It's like, oh, I've done my narrative arc now. That's great. I don't have to worry. But I mean, obviously, I did have to worry because I still had to cut it and show it to Creative Scotland and the rest of the staff and things like that. But you know, it obviously helps having all that feedback. That really helps with the edit process and being like, this is it.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess picking up on some of what you're saying there then, so you found your subjects kind of pushing your story in a way that you didn't expect it to move. Mm-hmm. And that, I guess, is a question for all of you. During that production process, were you finding things, and I guess it's slightly different for the two of you because you're doing stuff with scripts and essentially blueprints, but were you finding there were moments that were suddenly becoming more important because you had your actors in place and suddenly there was a moment of clarity and you thought, hold on a second, I need to push in more here, or you changed something slightly because of it? Did all of you find that being on set just changed the script in a way you didn't expect?
I feel like you're always changing it as you're going. I mean, the script is there. However, when you're working with actors, I like to work very closely with them on set. And then, I don't like doing rehearsals, so I like to just be on set, and then we talk to each other, and then play it out and block when you're blocking the scenes. But I love to have like a sort of open environment where it doesn't matter who you are. If you've got an idea, if it's going to better what we're doing, then you know it might not be the best idea, but it might spark another idea, and then you're just constantly all pitching together to make the best thing possible. So yeah, I mean, as I said, yeah, it's always sort of changing, but fundamentally, there's nothing that's been drastically changed during the making, because you still have to follow the beats of the narrative and get your point A, B, and C. You have to get the whole thing together. But there are those exciting moments where you're talking to an actor who's, what if I come in like this or I say something like that, and it's like, well, yeah, and then you sort of change the blocking of the scene, sort of thing. So yeah, there are moments like that are quite fun, which makes filmmaking fun for me anyway.
Yeah, I think there are, you'd really try and evolve things through the limitations in pre-production. I think is the moment where you're like having to constantly recalibrate the sort of ambitions with the realities of your budget, and you know, things like you finally recce your location and actually have to come to terms with the limitations, but then also the new discoveries of that, and then that opens like a new kind of exploration of your shot list. And in relation with I work with a cinematographer called Laura Dinnett, and you know, we had to, yeah, there was lots to find in that space, but also it was a bungalow house that we were filming in, and some of the rooms, like when we did our COVID pandemical working restrictions, 2 meter distance between people, like you can have half a person working in this room at any time. We're like, okay, that's a problem. So there's also things, pressures and time on shoot that kind of mean that there's naturally, you are evolving, and like Brian's saying, you're going, right, well, we're coming to the end of the day, you're gonna have to like lop off 3 shots from that shot list and find the sweet shot that's gonna like cater for all of that vision. You have those moments, but I feel like there's a lot of the recalibration comes obviously in post, when you see the damage and see what you've actually come out with, and like the things that are missing. And again, that's like, I think obviously a key part of the storytelling is that, you know, in terms of rewriting or re-envisioning the story, there were a couple of like things like the weather, for example. We had a scene where we were meant to be hanging up laundry, but it was raining, so obviously it's entirely illogical. So thankfully we shot that the first sort of day of the shoot, which meant the scene preceding it, which we came to a couple of days later, we had to kind of invert it, so it was taking the laundry in. But these sorts of things that are just like scary biscuits, if you get to like the shoot and you've done those the other way around, you're like, oh, this has turned out very badly. So that's low budget filmmaking, guys, where you're like, you don't have a lot of give, and so you are problem solving as much as you can on the shoot, but also predominantly, I think, when you get out and you're through the crazy of the shoot, which I don't know how it feels on doc, because I feel like the like it's more languid and relaxed, and it's not as
well, kind of, yeah, kind of.
That could be a misinterpretation.
No, I agree with you. Like when you first turn on, it is amazing the way you view something when you first see it versus when you're actually on the set doing the film and you've done the recce and you think you know the set, you know, you've written your ideas down, but actually it doesn't translate in reality at all. So you have to just be ready for that. And I think with the Bayview, like, I'd made an early decision that all my shots were, I cheated a few times, but most of my shots were locked off on the tripods, and I was going to shoot them like rooms and just have these room scenes but on a wide lens. And I think as soon as I started filming it, I was like, this is actually a nightmare, because I had like shots locked off, and I'd lapel mic'd all the people in the kitchen, Susie and some of the Ghanaian men and stuff, and they were going to start cooking and all this, and then some guy from a pub just like walks in and into the shot, and it's just like, hey Susie, I've not seen you in about 10 years and that, and it's just like, oh. But I'm like, did I include that? I mean, and then he obviously looks at the camera and starts addressing me, and it's like, oh God, man. I'm just like, and then he goes upstairs with some of my characters and disappears with them to go drinking or something. Where you take my characters? So yeah, and that's the problem with like being like, well, actually, I should have just done it everything handheld and just followed it. But that would have been a different story as well, and that totally affects the narrative of like the storytelling and having these like really subdued moments, then these little moments of thought and conversation. So I think I didn't really know. I knew kind of what was going to pan out, but I didn't know exactly until you shot some of those scenes and then realized that there are limitations that you have to work within. And that's, the limitations are the best bit, because it is quite satisfying actually when you crack that and go, all right, okay, this is how it's meant to fit. So, yeah. So
then you're in the edit, and I don't know about you guys, but I get the fear before I've seen all the footage of it's all going to be rubbish and it's all not going to come together, because you've had the chaos of the shoot and you kind of forget exactly what you shot, because you know your brain processes it that way. How much do you stick to your script or your plan in the edit, or are you just allowing yourself or your editor to follow through instinctively with what's there? What is that process like for each of you? Is it following the story? Is it going, well, the script says this? What's the balance? And also, how many voices were feeding in at each kind of stage of your edit as well? And was that a help or a hindrance?
I pretty much love the editing process, because I find the actual filming part of making a film absolutely fucking horrendous. Pandemonium, crazy. There's about 20 people asking you this and that, and you're just trying to direct somebody, and they're having an anxiety attack, and then you've got the fucking rig falls down, and it's just mad. Just fucking, then the prosthetics are coming out, and it's, how's that? It's, oh God, you've 8 hours on that, fix it, it's shite. I'm not like that on set. No, I'm not like a bastard. No, I love the edit, because, as I said, I do cut my own stuff, so I just close the door in my office in the house, and I can just be like, yes, now I can just not talk to anyone for like 2 weeks. And then, as you said, like the script's there, and I'm never really worried about the footage, because I've been editing for 10 plus years, so I'm always like, there's a film in there regardless, I'll get something out of it. So yeah, I don't go beat for beat. Sometimes it just doesn't work, and you're as you say, like you're saving. You see the damage and you're trying to save it. But yeah, I like that sort of almost fear of, will it cut together? And then once you're actually putting things together, you realize, holy shit, there's something really cool here and something a bit better than what I originally intended. And then you show it to somebody and then they're like, that's crap. Nah. But yeah, there was no voices in it, so I had no notes or anything because it was so fast. Usually I get my wife to come in and just like completely tell me what's the worst thing about it. Is this okay? She's like the sort of backbone that kind of tells me like, if it's working or not. But yeah, I love that process, and I think it's the most exciting part because you are sculpting it, you know.
That feels like that's the best art metaphor. It's sculpting, because it is that process of like actually, and I don't know if this is, everybody has this, but like the feeling that by the end of when you get to picture lock, you're like, actually this is pretty close to the rough cut in some way, but there's been this mad journey you've gone on to come back to it, and that's very much to do with possibly not for someone who directs and edits, but like working with an editor. I work with an editor called Megan Green, and she is intuiting the story from the script and the footage and telling it in the purest form. And obviously there's all these the finessing that goes on, but actually fundamentally the story that she told in the very first sort of rough cut was clear. And that's the thing, is that you what you work on through those next 500 cuts is like trying to get to underneath the story again and again, and try and sort of find every layer and sinew, so it's really like bursting with the energy of the themes and the thrust of the story and the fire of the story. But obviously, like, that rough cut is interpreted in a really clean way, I think, quite often. And we actually had to do some rewriting in the edit because we had this experience of realizing there was some, maybe a strand of story too many that was confusing and not adequately kind of like satisfied to like fully be part and coherently part of the main story. So there's the story of the mum, but there's also this story of her son, and you know, it's her story, but he is there. So like there was maybe a little bit too much given over to him in some of what we were reaching for in the script, that then when you come to picture, you realize it's too rich, it's too much, and it's taking energy away from the main strand and the main focus on her, and maybe confusing thematically and stuff. So we actually had to like trick our way through that, because it wasn't what was written, and so it wasn't what was shot, if that makes sense. So like we actually had to find apology shots where we were like, this is from a different part of the story, could we maybe just pop this in here, and then like try and like, he's looking at that, but can we just pretend that he's looking at this? And we had to sort of do some of that work, which is a bit puzzle solving, kind of that tricky bit of the edit, which I think is probably a lot of, yeah,
I don't know. I mean, I self-edit a lot, which I don't recommend, because you just end up, you know your footage too well, and sometimes you don't see what you can actually do with it. But with documentary, I always go, well, actually with the commission, I was a bit like, quite nervous about handing my footage over. And I did in the end hand my footage over to an editor, but I did do a lot of cutting beforehand, because it's just, your camera footage when you're doing documentary can just be a total mess. and I've never really got my head screwed on that sort of production thing. So yeah, I mean, I think there were some shots I just sort of made up and had to like come back into use, I think, but that's fine in a way, you know, that's just how it is. You don't want to go all the way back up to Aberdeen and start filming again. God, not another night in the bunk beds. No, it's actually lovely, but yeah, I don't really know. Yeah.
It's really interesting you said about the narrative arc or finding that anchor scene really between the mum and the son, that conversation being such a significant unlocking of what you were going to tell, because then like you say, that became the, I keep trying to think of anchor, that's scene.
Yeah, metaphor. I know, it's a bit annoying. I've blinded that idea.
Yeah, but just that it became the thing from which everything moved towards or moved away from, and so that kind of being your guide through.
Absolutely, and it's as you know, someone said in Scottish Documentary Institute, it's like composing a piece of music where you place that note in the edit, is just going to completely change the meaning of the film. And it is quite strange because you can put it at the start. I mean, fortunately with documentary you have that flexibility. With narrative you might not be able to do that because they're in costume or they've got a scar or something, then they don't have a scar or something like that. But with the documentary you can have that creative freedom. And yeah, I think that kind of really sort of helped me navigate and steer. But I actually, before the commission, I had no idea what a narrative arc was, to be honest. But I'm glad I know now, so yeah.
Yep, it's all a learning process. I'm going to open up for audience questions in a second. I'm going to ask one more, and then I'm going to ask you guys to throw your questions in. Your films are all now playing at festivals, so they're finally out with an audience. And this might be a bit more of a philosophical question, but do you feel that your film is ever finished? And what is that point at which you feel like it's done, it's finished, I can now kind of move on to the next thing?
When you run out of money?
No, it's true. When you run out of money and there's no more time. Yeah, I don't know. You can go now.
Well, yeah, I think that's both of those things. You have to get it into a shape, and there's a point at which, there is that old Van Gogh. Is it Van Gogh or someone? Someone says it. Oh, it was Da Vinci. Sorry, they're all the same to me, artists. But that's there is no end point to art. It's just all constantly in motion, and I think, in the same way that, we saw Timekeepers of Eternity on Wednesday night, and, how something can be reimagined, that's a bit philosophical, guys. But yeah, in terms of our process, I feel like it's just about stopping yourself tinkering anymore. And you can feel the over-tinker happening, I think. I think there's a point, and certainly in the edit, for example, where you're unmaking decisions you just made and remaking them again, you go, okay, we're actually losing our minds here, and we just have to kind of make a choice and trust the choice and understand that nothing will be always perfect, and that perfection is not a thing to strive for in any way. Strive for the truth, strive for the idea that you're offering something in motion, that you are in motion as well as an artist, and it was you then and not you now. So the idea that as artists we feel like it must be deeply representative of us, and if it's a little bit crunky or clunky, that people will view you as something or perceive you, or that it has to be your calling card. But actually I think it's that feeling of just trusting that it's if you really want to be present with the work you're making, you have to totally cut away your ego from that and just feel very rooted in that particular idea and story and character.
I don't know. I feel like there is a point where I'm happy enough with it to sort of let go of it, You tinker away. I mean, there is the deadline, but that joke aside, you will, chip away at it chisel away until it's the thing that you're most comfortable putting out there. But in terms of, is it ever really done? I mean, I don't know about you. Well, probably the same with you guys, but whenever you're watching it again, you can see every little bit that you've messed up. Or
yeah, I always feel like that.
The Frankenstein monster film that you've stitched together, and you're sitting in your chair watching it, but everyone else seems to be okay, and it's okay, well, once you come to terms with the fact that it's a film now. It's out in the world. People are watching it. People are enjoying it or hating it. It doesn't matter. You just kind of like, fuck it. Let's move on to the next one. See if I can make it better next time. You know. So I think there's a part of that sort of drives me to make the next thing, and which I'm quite prolific. So I must be really miserable all the time. But yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you gauge people's reactions, and you know,
yeah, looking at the side of their faces when they're watching, they're sweating. Like,
why did you make that decision? Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I was thinking over COVID as well. It's just like almost made it impossible to finish anything, which is why it's so nice if you can apply and get these commissions and stuff. They really help you tie a knot on it and just say that's that, and they're happy with it, so that you're kind of like, that's cool. If they've kind of like, you know, they're usually pretty frank with you. If they're going to be like, you actually need to do some more work on this or something. So, yeah, I'm on a practical scale, but yeah, on a philosophical scale, I don't really know. I think it doesn't ever feel finished.
Yeah.
It always doesn't, does it? It's quite organic, isn't it? It's not as clear cut as that. So.
Amazing. Questions, anyone? Any question at all? Amelia.
Hopefully this is working. Yeah, actually my question feeds in very nicely to what you just mentioned there, Daniel, about, you know, the impact of the pandemic, and I just wondered, you know, with where we are now in this slight post-pandemic-ish world, how has it been going through, especially the festival circuit process, in this time? And do you think things have shifted like enough to making, you know, obviously we're starting to see more in-person things happening now. Do you think that that's going to continue, or like, did you get a sense it was harder to kind of, you know, network and make any connections for distribution and things like that? How is it now?
I mean, I'm probably not the most experienced person to ask that question, because I've only screened 2 films on festivals before. The first one I did was, you know, money out of my own pocket kind of thing, and I just sort of submitted it. Whereas with this with the Bridging the Gap scheme and the program that they offer, they kind of cover your distribution and stuff. So there is some safeguarding of, like, you know, looking after their filmmakers, putting your work out, and linking you up with the right contacts and stuff like that. So which they're really good at. And even if, you know, even through Zoom and stuff, you know, these things are still possible. But yeah, it is really difficult. In terms of making the film and stuff, it's really difficult. And your idea changes a lot when you're, you know, sitting in the house, and you kind of doubt yourself, don't you? Because you kind of think, actually, this is not worth. But actually, the original idea you had was fine. I certainly felt that with the documentary. I was like, I had the idea, the seed of the idea, as we were, you know, going into lockdown and stuff, and then it got put on hold, and, you know, applying for it and stuff, and going round in circles of that. But I think things people are finding a bit better to, you know, communicate through online platforms and in person. So, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm quite stressed out actually, because I found it quite, not stressed out, but like, I'm really stressed out. So you're like, whoa, okay. Step back. No, but
Daniel's, can we get a medic?
Yeah, no, but it is a bit like quite intense, isn't it? When you meet all these filmmakers and you have to talk to them for the first time, having not been in a room together.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a recluse, so like I like the Zoom calls, you know, I can turn it off when you're done, and then you can sit and just relax. I find all these sort of events kind of a bit stiff and a bit. I'm a bit more of a, like, just fucking chill out, relax, talk normal, shoot the shit, rather than, oh yes, well, I did this and blah blah blah, all that crap. But yeah, I think, I mean, I do though. I mean, I'm here because, you know, people need to know that I'm making stuff, you know.
This is chill.
Oh fuck! I'm relaxed. Like the heat in here is incredible. Like, I'm not stressed in this heat whatsoever. But yeah, no, it was different. It was weird when everything kind of went, you know, with that, you know, that whole pandemic thing, and then it was kind of, everything was kind of online and things like that, which I kind of preferred, because then I could just sit on the couch. But to be fair, I'm never sitting. I'm always working, so I never really have time to usually do these sort of things, and when I do them, I usually waffle on and get anxious and self-conscious and neurotic about everything I'm saying, like right now. But yeah, I don't know. Does that answer your question, or did I just talk a lot of shit?
No, yeah, totally.
Is that okay?
It's interesting that I was partly asking it because I found that I find the Zoom things difficult because I feel people are actually the opposite of what you were saying, that they get more official and sort of, right, I must pretend that I'm all, I may be wearing my pajamas, but I'm going to pretend and I'm here to pitch to you. And there's no like pleasantries or, the human stuff of the conversation sometimes gets missed out as compared to just sitting, having a real life chat. There's no coffee or whatever. So
yeah, I think I've got just a bit more of a warped sense of, society, I guess.
I think there's that experience for the filmmakers and obviously delegates and stuff, but also just like for punters, I think the hybrid festival is brilliant because like it's the best of both worlds. I think if festivals could keep it up, it would be amazing because I know so many people for lots of reasons can't make it and can't balance dependence or disabilities, and so being able to be part of something and having the Q&A's broadcast or whatever is a lifesaver really in terms of keeping connected. So I do think there's a balance to be found because there's like all that stuff we say about the learning from the pandemic. But yeah, I get what you're saying in terms of like the discomfort of the schmooziness. But I think you're right in a way, like seeing people relaxes me in a way. The idea of being at these events sometimes terrifies me, but actually when I get there, I realize everyone's normal and so am I, sort of. So yeah, it's fine.
Did we have an online question?
We did have an online question. The question was, are there any screenwriting manuals or other kinds of books that have been an inspiration to you as screenwriters?
No.
I would say there's a few books that have been recommended to me, and what I find really useful is like, say when you're in the early moments with an idea or kind of developing something in that kind of gestational stage, and sometimes you hit walls, like quite often I'm like, read a novel or read one of these books and I'm half reading it. It's like coming to these things, like quite often I go to these things and I'm present, semi-present, because I'm also like, it's a space, a liminal space of thought that isn't hard on the project, but it's somewhere kind of before the project that's allowing me to kind of go to the other plane of thought. And so I feel like I find those books good not to be reverential to, but just as like a little entryway into a tiny room that's just about thinking in a way. A ticket to like pretending to be reading something. It's like when you put your porno in front of a newspaper and you're pretending you're reading a newspaper. It's like, I'm pretending to read the book about screenwriting, but actually I'm totally just thinking about my own ideas. Why did I say that? Someone stop me.
Yeah,
anyway,
you said the porno thing.
I said
that was
porno.
strange.
I don't even look at pornos. Anyway, yeah. So the books I say are useful in that respect. I think Save the Cat by Blake Snyder, because it's really American Hollywood, like feature writing book. So it's quite full on, but also it's very functional, and it like breaks down how to write like a log line and all of this stuff, which becomes pretty critical in the industry we're in. And also Into the Woods by John York, because it talks about story rather than necessarily screenwriting, and that in itself I think is useful when you're kind of looking at the growth and change of characters. So those are the ones I'd suggest.
I'm kind of strange about books like that. I feel like it overcomplicates things for me. Like I get in my own head, and I'm trying to write the script like the person who wrote the book. So I'm just like having this weird sort of moment where, is this my script, or like, am I writing this like the stereo instructions of this book? Or so I kind of just get kind of mixed up in my own head when I'm doing that. So yeah, I've got no recommendations other than just fucking sit down and write it yourself.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess
Anything for documentary that's been really useful for you?
not literature-wise as such. I mean, I just, I always feel like there's two types of watching. You're either watching to enjoy a documentary or watching to see how the other filmmaker works, and I find that really useful. I think I must have watched quite a few sort of various styles and formats of documentary while I was, and during the commission at Scottish Documentary Institute, they bring in really fantastic filmmakers, and they come in and talk about their work and, suggest reading and stuff. So you get all that through them, I suppose. And you don't really know where you're going to get your inspiration for these things. So it's good to have like a wide spread of things. Reading's great as well, though. Yeah, like totally. But I can't think off the top of my head about.
I think then the kind of main advice is find the thing that works for you, and just be consuming the thing that you want to make, whether that's screenplay format or watching things or listening to things.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say.
Would that kind of cover it? Yeah? Any other questions? Nobody has any other questions. We have 5 minutes, so we can take another question. Any other online ones? No? Okay, well, I have another question that I will pull up for you. So I did have a question around, I guess, the learning that you've had. So you've all been through a process where you've made stuff yourself for very, very low budget, and now you've been through a system where still low budget, but it's more of a budget, so you can breathe a little bit more. What's been the stuff that you've learned that you think, gosh, this is what I'm going to take forward into the next thing? What's the bits of advice you can give for newer filmmakers, whether they're making stuff off their own back or whether they're trying to apply for some of these schemes?
The advice I'd give anybody who's new and trying to do this, perseverance. It's a really hard fucking job for anybody to give a shit about what you're doing. So you need to really figure out if this is the actual thing you want to do, because if it's not, then you're going to get absolutely beaten to a pulp. Other than that, it's a lot of fun when when you get to make something. But if you're going to make something, do it on your own terms first. Figure out what you're doing, experiment a little bit, then see where you go. But it's just something you're absolutely going to have to keep working away at and chiseling away at until somebody's like, oh, yeah, well, yeah, I'll give you a shot. Do you want me to put it in a festival for you? Oh, please. And then it just snowballs from there. I'm not really this miserable all the time. It's just really fucking hot in here. I'm so sorry.
I was thinking concerning just the actual filmmaking process and shot lists, actually. I always I'd say to encourage people to write massive shot lists and write really elaborate ideas as well, because sometimes I find I'll have a shot list with the really pragmatic stuff and then the slightly more off the wall stuff. And in documentary, you have to be respectful of the boundaries of the people you're working with, but it's not to say you can't try out ideas and stuff. And I always get really annoyed when I go do a shoot and I kind of cast off a bunch of ideas because I think, they'll never be up for that. And I sort of throw them away and then go to my bed and I'm like, God, I actually should have just tried that out. Because what you end up writing for your film may not be compatible, and that's fine. They'll just say that's not possible. But time and time again, I've found working in documentary is that every idea is valid to an extent. And sometimes the most interesting shots are the ones you write that are actually quite banal, and you think are banal and are actually really exciting. So my sort of tip would be to if you can try and keep your shot list and do all those things. As a filmmaker, you learn a lot from that experience as well, I think.
Yeah, I think I really feel what you're saying there, both counts, and also I think that just sort of riffing a little bit off what Bryan's saying as well about being kind of persevering, and I think it is really hard if you're coming at this, for me, as a career change, even though, one freelance life to another freelance life, but doing it a little bit older with dependents, with care responsibilities, it can feel very hard to persevere because it's not a forgiving place to the film world. And so for me, the way I've found a way to kind of navigate that moving forwards and making it sustainable is kind of working across mediums, so working across TV, film, still working in theatre a bit, and trying to find like other vessels for the creativity, so that film doesn't become because film can be slow, and getting the money can be slow, and getting to that point. And certainly, you know, I would really like to move to features now, but that journey can be like another 3-4 years if you're lucky. And so that side of things is like, well, how am I going to be creative in that time? It can't just be that one film thing that's going to feed my soul. So yeah, I think like, I'm not sure that's even remotely answering your question, Raisah. I feel like that's
about variation.
Yeah, I think kind of moving forwards though, like the things I take that kind of I would like to build on are about nurturing the shooting environment, becoming a more nurturing space. And I feel like we need to start being activists about how run down the industry is getting in terms of how crews are looked after. And like, we're at a point now where I think maybe it could be really good for Scotland, because a lot of really talented people are getting snapped up by Amazon Prime, and they're being paid properly for their work. I don't know if the conditions are amazing, so I can't comment on that. But also, I just think that there's a conversation needs to be had about how we make it a nourishing environment on set. I think our days should be shorter. Like, I think I'm very tired. I'm a tired lady. And like, long days are just not good for anyone. And, you know, we've seen in the past some years people dying on sets and people crashing their cars on their drive home. And this is very sad where I'm taking this conversation. I'm very sorry, guys.
It's a good way to end it, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a nice low point. But yes, yeah, I think I would love to see if there's a way of having an environment that isn't just like, we're going to work a 13-hour day, you know?
But I think very useful advice for new filmmakers, because we know that sometimes the change comes from the newer people coming in. So actually it's very relevant, I would say. Yeah, absolutely. We are out of time. Thank you so much, Daniel, Bryan, Maryam. Please go watch their films if you haven't seen them already. I think you can still, Matt, can they still catch them on the online player as well? Yes, they can. So if you've missed the screening, there's still a way of watching. If we could just say thank you to our panel.
Thanks very much.
Cheers.